Hi guys, it's Richard from Bagnall and Kirkwood. Today what we're doing is we're having a look at this leaky inlet valve on a Kral. So this one's a puncher NP02 and this is one of the types that have got the gauge on the front. So if you've got a puncher breaker, this will be exactly the same. So what we're going to do is we're going to replace the inlet valve moulding or valve piston, inlet valve, whatever you want to call it. That's available on its own as a spare. The O-rings, so we'll do a pack of all these three parts, the piston and the two O-rings that you're going to go past that need to be replaced. We've got that as a pack, or you can buy a full pack of O-rings for the whole rifle and then buy the piston separate or the inlet valve separate, however you want to do it. So we're going to get right to it. First of all, we're going to remove these two. Actually, in fact, we'll do a quick explanation of why we know it's leaking from there. So we put a finger over one end of the fill valve, put some leak detector into this area. So if you don't have a leak detector, you could probably make some with some very liquid and a little bit of water in there. And then we saw bubbles coming back out. So it's going to be this valve. First thing we did, this rifle's completely empty, as you can see there. But if your rifle isn't completely empty, you can crank the pressure gauge a few turns, and what it'll do is it'll blow the seal that's on the other side of that and then decant it out. But first of all, what we're going to do today, remove the barrel band. So just two grub screws hold this in place, one on that side, one on this side. Taking those out, the barrel band just pulls over. Then we're going to remove the pressure gauge just to make sure the rifle's completely empty before we remove the cylinder, or cylinder end in fact. There we go, pressure gauge. And now what we're going to do is we're just going to put this cylinder into a vise with some soft jaws, and I'm going to use a bar and just crank it. Sometimes they're easy enough to get off without going in the vise. In fact, this one here is, but sometimes they have to go in the vise, clamp it up, and sometimes it's good to give them a little bit of a shock. So put in a tight fitting bar and just give it a bit of a shock with a hammer just to break any seal that's there. This one we're just going to continue taking off. It just keeps it unscrewing. That's it there. So next, I'm going to have to use a big adjusty spanner to get this end piece off. I'll just go and get one of those. So we're back with the adjusty spanner, and we're just going to crank this open. That's it, you got the cap, the spring, we also do that as a spare if ever you need one of them. And in this case, the piston's just falling out, the valve moulding, just falling out. And we'll just check for a bit of crud or anything in there. Nothing, but you can see there's a little bit of wear. You're always going to get this little bit of wear. And we've had them where they're really, when they're getting older, they're really worn. You see it's like a gouged seal into them. This one's probably leaked prematurely. I would have expected a bit more out of that, so it might have just been a bit of crud or something in the valve. This is where that's sealing against, so if you've damaged this, damaged the sealing face against, if you change this and it's still leaking, you're probably going to need to change the whole unit, which we have got as well. I'm just going to put a bit of degreaser in there to clean it off. So I just sprayed a bit of degreaser in there just to see if there was anything on the seat in there moving about, but not at all. I'll just let that dry off. So while we're waiting for that just to dry off, we're going to take the old O-ring off the pressure gauge. So it's that one gone. And I'm going to take just the big O-ring off this one. So we're just going to put the new O-rings back on. So I'll bring these across. So a little bit of nollie grease. That bit was soaking it up, need a bit more. Come on. There we go. It's a new one on there. And a new one on the pressure gauge as well. Just push that one on. There we go. So we'll put the valve spring in. Sorry, we'll put the valve in. A new one. And put the spring in. Put the cap back on. That's it, tightened up. Pressure gauge back on. So pressure gauge, sometimes you can put these too tight, but that one's doesn't need to be super tight, just tight. So then we'll put the new, well not the new, but we'll put the replacement part back in here. Just like when it's coming out, it was hand tight at first, but it will need the bar when it gets to the end. So now I can feel it starting to press up against that O-ring, do its work. That's it. Barrel band back on. Slides over and the grub screws back in. So what we're going to do next is we're going to fill it up, put it on a 48-hour leak test, make sure that the leak's been solved. But what's also important quite often on rifles when they're empty, and this is the case with the Kral also, when they've been completely empty and you're filling from scratch, the air will go straight up the barrel. So you need to make sure the rifle's cocked before you fill it. And we tend to give it what we call a blast fill on the dive bottle. So that just gives it like a quick spurt of air that locks the valve, closes it, the main valve that's in here, and then allows you to fill without the air going through the barrel. If you're hand pumping it, it's a little bit more difficult, but just go as fast as you can at first until you try to lock that valve closed. If you're using one of the home compressors, you're going to really struggle because it's a tiny bit of air coming in every single time that compressor goes through a stroke, and you're going to really struggle to get that valve closed. So you might need to take it to your local shop to get a blast of air, or your local club or anything like that. But that's the end of this one. Thank you for watching. As always, I'll put a link to the parts below. and we'll catch you on the next one. Thank you.